Good evening, everybody. Today we have the Diderot in full effect, or the Diderot effect in full effect, I don't know. So when I bought the plasma cutter, which works great by the way, shout out to my fast cut CNC folks, I have a teeny tiny workshop and I have a real hard time loading the heavy sheets that I want to load in there. This video is all about building a vacuum lifter so that I can actually start getting those heavy plates of steel that I want for my skid steer attachments into the workshop. Winter is upon us and it's a great time to start working in the dark. So I'll do my best to give you folks some good footage, but you know, if you want to see me build a vacuum lifter, then stick around. And also, full disclaimer, I'm modifying a design that I did find online. So there's this YouTuber, Dr. D Flow, that did build a vacuum lifter, though he didn't use it for anything but 1/4-inch plate. And I know that I want to lift 3/4-inch plate. So we're going to make some slight modifications to that, and I'll link it in the description. And with that being said, let me get going to cut some tube. First thing we need to do is measure 72 inches. Mark and cut 72 inches. This was fun. It was a great opportunity for me to use all my leftover material. And the suction cup holders I actually cut out of 1/4-inch steel too, but leftover. So everything needs to be used. This is going to be loud for a second. So this here is going to be the primary beam of it all. Since I don't have space for a forklift in my workshop yet, and by yet, yes, eventually you're going to see a video of me building my own workshop. Not this year. I won't have lifting lugs for the forklift just now, which is fine, I think, because when I need it, I can almost always modify it. 47 inches. All right, just trying to optimize for cutting outside here for a second, because the rest of this I can cut inside the workshop. This here is going to be the cross member. Then we have 3 of those small pieces which will sit here. We will have this thing that runs across, and then crossing here we're going to get the 8-inch things. I have 1/4-inch reinforcements that will go onto the middlemost sections on either side. And then we have stuff for those sides here too. So I think you can see where this is going. However, before we talk about this, let's talk a little bit about how I came up with my suction cups. Because, full disclosure, I didn't buy anything from the guy. So, where do we start? Lever. Here we have nice nitrile rubber suction cups. And basically, for each of these, I have 8. I started cutting out prototypes in 12 gauge. This was my very first prototype. And it worked great. It sits on here great. The only issue I had with it was there's quite a rim around it, which I wanted to make smaller. So this is my iteration 2, and the only difference really, if you put them on top of each other, is that the second revision is thicker in the middle and thicker on the outside. So this is something that I settled for. And then got my plasma cutter. Here you can see an example of the 1/4-inch steel, thick. It sits on here nicely, right? And I can screw it in with those M6 screws. And what I now need to do, I need to weld some nuts into the center so that I can actually lift this up. So You know, this is what we have to do. I already welded 3, so we have 5 more to go. I really like it tight. So for 1/4 inch, apparently there's a rule that the minimum size of the hole that you can cut with a plasma cutter is about the thickness of the material you're cutting. So for 1/4 inch, my hole shouldn't be smaller than 1/4 inch. And I cut it like 0.25 millimeters bigger than 1/4 inch, and the holes still suck. So what I have to do for all of these basically, because there's quite a taper on the inside, and granted I'm still learning, so I have to cut those out. And this is something I do before I weld on the nuts. So the 3 ones I showed you, I already cut out the holes, and I cut them out for 70 and 64, so slightly bigger. All right, since I didn't think about it, I hope that when you do anything with plasma cutting, you think about it. So I cut these reinforcements here that I need to sit here, and as you can see, I didn't account for the welding. So now I have to grind the edges off of all of these to sit on a roughly 45-degree weld. These assemblies here are all ground and bored and welded. They are just waiting for me to paint them. All right, while this is drying, we're moving on to phase 2, and phase 2 is hooking it up to the skid steer.